Is that a real background or is that a
This
virtual?
is my living room.
Ah.
Yeah, this is my living room. You like the background?
Yes, I do.
Like my Laura Ashley wallpaper.
And I like how everything is so well color coordinated. Your teeth look white.
White.
Green teeth. You look like that episode of Friends. Have you seen that episode of Friends?
Which one?
Was it Russ? He got his teeth whitened and they were like glowing in the dark.
Listen, this is natural Sensodyne, yeah? Thank you, Anthony, for accepting to be on this episode. People will say on podcasts, oh, I'm so excited and everything, but truly, thank you for accepting and trusting me with your information that we're going to share. And the reason why I'm excited and the reason why I set up this podcast is that I'm so keen to learn how people have unfolded in resilience and maintain resilience. I'm interested in the human behavior, the attitudes that make somebody resilient, So that's my thing. So I just would love you to introduce yourself to the audience. Who is Anthony Lindsay?
Okay, so I am Anthony Lindsay. And as we were talking about before, depending on how long you've known me, there might be some other things in there. I am the child of double immigrants. I say that because my grandparents migrated from Jamaica during Windrush, and then we moved to the States. So I have that, if you want to call victimhood status times two. But, being raised by strong West Indian values, strong West Indian parents and grandparents, just, I was built for resilience, because these were the type of people that were forged in a different era. These were like old school people who worked hard, woke up early, took care of their bodies, may not have had a bunch of letters behind their name, but just had knowledge and wisdom and character and a lot of things that, just being in that household and being held to that standard, you have no choice. You've got to be that guy. You've got to be that person that's going to, do what you have to do.
I like that you brought up the importance of having grandparents and family from the Caribbean. And when I think about that, I always go back to my grandmother, my grandfather. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To my mother, to my father. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because growing up, I definitely saw examples of resilience. And, the getting up, my mum working 3 jobs, my dad working a really good job. Do you know what I mean? And both of them providing for me. Seeing my gran, my gran was known in Forest Gate because she had just gold teeth. And up and down Upton Park, she go Upton Park Market with my granddad. It'll always be like dressed to the nines and stuff. But in the household, it was clean, perfect, but they grafted. They had so much grit and fortitude. You get what I mean? So I suppose that seeing that has definitely had an impact upon, where we are now in life. But there's one thing that I want to highlight, Anthony, because I was looking on your LinkedIn and everything. So I'm going to read out what I saw. I saw business leader, author. I'm going to add that, author, okay? Radio presenter, ChatGPT
Evangelist, yes.
A founder of Asta Business Centers and Startups and Side Hustles. And also on your About Me page, it says, I help startups and side hustles make their first 100K. Why is that important, the 100K?
Because, I may not look it, but I've been working in finance for 30 years, right? And I've been working in every key part of finance. So I started out doing collections. I've done wealth management. I've done lending. I've done borrowing. I've managed large business units. I've been a senior leader in Citibank. I was an assistant vice president. I've done a lot of things, and I've always been very focused on self-development. growing up having grandparents who, like you said, grafted, no, like my grandmother used to say, every mickle makes a muckle.
Oh yes, I know that saying. Every mickle makes a
Every
muckle. It's
every mickle
true.
makes a muckle. Now, I always say, I don't know what a mickle is or a muckle, but I know what she was saying. And just being around that, I just always had a entrepreneurial spirit about me, right? And reading all the books, first book like that I read in that realm was Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, and it really switched something in me because I was doing entrepreneurial stuff before that, like when I was in the music industry. But I read that book, and since then, that whole industry has grown. So we're in 2024, everybody's a guru, everybody's going to show you how to make 10 grand a week and all of that. But what I realized is without a system, you're not going to be able to be what I call scalable, sustainable, repeatable, and franchisable. So as far as the 100,000, in my 9 to 5, I work with, high net worth individuals. And there's a whole market of people, the Anthony Robbins, the Stephen Bartlett's, all of them that will talk that very aspirational big stuff. But what I realized for me is that's not where I want to operate. I want to operate with that person that's -6 months to 12 months in business, that's still trying to figure it out, that before they can make that $1 million and get those high net worth clients that everybody's telling them about, they need to make their first dollar. But I need to give them a system that they can duplicate that and get them to the point that their key milestone at the beginning is probably 100,000 as opposed to that million. But once you've got a system in place and I've helped you build a strategy and a system that is quantifiable, you'll make that 100,000 and maybe you don't need me anymore. But more importantly, you have a system in place and you understand how you made that 100,000 and you understand how to do it again. And you, like I said, you may not need me to do it anymore because I've taught you how to fish. I haven't just given you a fish.
What I love what you're saying as well, and I want to touch on this, and if you could just further expand, is your early childhood back in the US, because I'm thinking, why is it that you want to help individuals put together a system to make their first 100,000? So could you talk through your early childhood in the US and how that possibly played a part in fueling your ambition and success to helping individuals?
All right. So growing up in the Bronx, like at the time when I was in the Bronx, I'm a little 16-year-old with dreadlocks, had dreadlocks and all that. And when I got to high school, I was in a program in New York. They had this program called co-op, where if you had a certain grade point average, they'd allow you to go to school one week and then you could work another week, but you were still responsible for all the schoolwork. So you had to have a high enough grade point average and have demonstrated that you could sustain that. And, at that time, like I said, young guy in the Bronx, dreadlocks, the only two places that I could get a job really was in a mail room or as a messenger. So the first job I got a mail room in one of the World Trade Centers, and I was working there. Then I got a job working for what is now J.P. Morgan Chase. So I'm in there doing my thing in there. And I was fortunate enough to be around people who were doing things. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm there, I'm seeing from a banking and commercial perspective, people's accounts and, working and understanding money, even though I'm working in the mailroom. I get to say I work on Wall Street, right? And then I go back to school and I'm doing my thing. And at that time, this was early doors, because as I said, I'm older than I look. This was when rap was first starting to happen. And my sister had gone to a concert and she met this guy, and he was a dancer for an artist at the time. And they became really good friends. And he introduced me to the music industry, essentially. So now I'm in high school. I'm seeing people get signed to record deals. I'm seeing people making money, and I want to be a rapper, and I'm exploring being a rapper, but I'm not that talented, but I work hard. And it then occurred to me, like they used to have a lot of music conferences, and no one would ever invite me to speak on a panel at a music conference. So I was like, forget that. I'm going to make my own music conference, right? So I started a music conference, and then I said, well, how do I increase my value? And this was before the internet. So what I started doing is I started going around to record shops, buying the vinyl records and getting the address for the record label and then putting it down. And I compiled a list of record labels. Then I started charging people to join my network, right? So people would join what we had this thing called the UEN, the Ultimate Entertainment Network, and people would pay a monthly fee. They'd have access to my database, but then they'd have to bring something to the table. So like, let's just say you're a singer, you'd have to come in and say, all right, well, my name's Sophia, I'm a singer. What I will do is if there's a producer in here, I'll lay vocals for you. So we were all bartering service, but then that increased my value. And then I realized, well, actually, I can expand this, right? So it was a combination of being in places and being around people who inspired me and showed me that it could happen, seeing my grandparents doing things, and just that era of, you know, if you want to make something happen, you can either sell drugs, because I'm in the Bronx, or you can go out and have another hustle. And my grandparents would beat the daylights out of me if I ever came home with anything related to that. So I said, let me try this legit way.
So what I've taken from that is importance of your environment, and
Yes.
also you created a business based on people not inviting you to their,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because
yeah.
I'm saying to myself that you have high self-confidence, high self-esteem. So in terms of your wanting to help people reach their 100K, would you say in the early days that you were sort of like, you didn't know at the time, but formulating a template for your business now, isn't it?
That's it. Exactly. So it was saying, well, I wish at that time. So I helped Jay-Z set up his first office, right? So I'm around the Jay-Z's, you know, one of my mentors, Russell Simmons. I'm around all those people, but I'm not on that level, right? I needed someone that was 2 steps ahead of me, which I did find, my close friend Don. So having someone a couple of steps ahead of you is quite often more powerful than having someone that's so far advanced in the game that they're not going to engage with you anyway. Like I can read the books that Tony Robbins has written. I can read all of the self-help books of the people that have been successful. But what I really need, I need someone that I can pick up the phone and say, well, how do I? Or could you show me? Or could you give me a template for? And they'll take my call. You know, so as far as, and you said it completely, that whole concept of me now having someone, me learning in those days what I'm doing now. I didn't know it then, but it was shaping me to be the type of person that I'm like, okay, like I do a annual business expo, and in the States I used to do an annual music expo. And it's always been built around the idea that the people that are at the top of the game will put their name on the flyer because people want to see that. But the people I really want you to meet are the people that, as I said, are 2 steps ahead of you. So in that first 100,000 that I'm trying to help people create, I'm approaching them from a position of, I know where you are. I'm a couple of steps ahead of you. And as you've just said, I have a template. So it's like a franchise in the sense that the reason why 99.5% of franchises are successful is because there's a formula. You don't have to figure it out. It's a proven, tested formula and strategy.
I love that you touched on mentorship. That's so key, right, Anthony? I remember when I first wanted to start I Can, and I reached out to a lady, I think she's director of UEL, Femi, and I said to her, you know, I need 2 people, 3 people, whoever that you feel that I can speak to. And she said, okay, I can recommend these 2 individuals. one of them again was another Femi, and another was a lady called Jacqueline Peart. And I phoned both of them. Femi gave me some wonderful advice. Jacqueline said, let me meet you. And we've just had a solid relationship ever since. You know, so mentorship is really key, especially for those, as you said, about 2-3 levels above from what you are doing, can pick up the phone and just cry, just say, I just do not understand this. Or even I remember getting advice about how to price my work. I didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
Didn't have a clue. And just, you know, they can just share some secrets about that. But also, how many no's did you get, Anthony, along your journey?
Man, listen, all I hear was no. But the thing is, I'm a salesperson as well, and I train people on sales. No's have to be fuel. So I've trained myself that every time I hear a no, that's another battery in my back. Every time I hear that, because that then means I won't become negative, because you're going to hear no's. And as I always say, no doesn't mean never. Do you know what I'm saying? And if I can then explore why the no, why the no, why the no. So why are you telling me no? What do I need to, I turn it back on that person. What do I need to do to get yes from you next time? And people will respect that. The right type of people will respect that. And if they're honest with you, they're now giving you a game plan and a blueprint for success. But if you just take that no and give up, then nothing can ever happen. Nothing good can happen, because you're not doing anything anymore.
But how do we get from what can I do to make this work for me? Because we've got individuals, isn't it, who just when they hear a no, that's it, they're done. You know, confidence is shattered, self-esteem low. I cannot be bothered. I can't do this anymore just after one. You know, but there's a story, isn't it? KFC, Mr. Colonel Sanders, is
Yeah.
it after 1,099 or whatever no's, the next no was look at what the legacy that he has left, type of thing. But what advice would you give to somebody who after one and just two and after three no's had just said, I can't do this anymore?
Well, there's two things I'd say. One is barriers to entry. So the lower the barrier to entry is, so the easier it is to get a yes, the less profitable the thing is going to be. So if you are going after something that has a high barrier to entry, it's going to be harder to get in. You're going to get more no's, but it's more worth it at the end, right? And that sounds very technical. However, my other thing, and this is just something that people will take on board or they won't, is just my faith. Like, I know that God purposed me for something. When God was creating this universe, he looked and he shaped me for a thing. It took me up into my 50s to even come up with that line of, I help startups and side hustlers make their first 100,000, but he was shaping me and working me through that thing. And by knowing that the God that I serve cannot be wrong and does not fail, it gives me the energy and power to say, well, maybe there's a no in this area, but I can learn something from this area and then move to another area. And then maybe and as I compile those things, I'll get to my yes, and that yes will happen at the right time. So there's a faith element in it, and understanding that if it's easy, you're not going to make any money in it anyway.
So faith has definitely played a part in your success, and to be able to deal with the rejections and the no's and build up your resilience tank type of thing. But what about when has your resilience really been put to the test, when you think, oh my gosh, I don't know I'm going to get through this one, or I need to maybe stop? Can you share a moment when that has possibly happened?
So I'll tell you, and this isn't business related, but it represents both the faith side and it represents the resilience. So I have an older daughter. So I had my first daughter when I was 17. And then I now have a 4-year-old ready to be a 5-year-old. And so there's a huge difference in ages. And I made a certain amount of commitments to myself about this opportunity with this child. And my daughter, my second daughter, Cadence, she was born about 2.5 months early, right? So she was very, she was quite early. And again, in my mind, I had how everything's going to be, because now I'm a grown man, right? And I'm ready for this, and I've, planned everything out as best you can. And so she's born, she's in the incubator, we're going there, seeing her, because she was in the hospital for about 2 months, right? And in fact, the week before she was born, we were in Italy. So I always say, if she had been born a week earlier, she'd be Italian. But so she's born, she's doing well. And then because she's a preemie, there's a lot of tests for her. And she went for one of her tests. She went for an eye test, and they said she needs glasses. And this was, and I don't know if everyone can understand this, but for me, because I had all these things, she's going to be an engineer who's also a doctor, who's also a musician. And I'm like, now she has this limitation that is going to prevent her from being all the things I want her to be. And it wasn't a resilience because something that I needed to do, but I had to show a resilience because I didn't want my wife to see me like feeling like all of these different things. But what I realized, and this is going back to my faith, and it draws everything together. Because God has created us for a purpose, everything that we are and everything that we are not is designed for our purpose. So when you then look at a situation where, like, I'd love to be able to sing, man. Like, if I could sing, it would be game over. I'd sing everything. I'd be singing all day, right? But God has not given me that voice because that's not within my purpose. But what he has given me is a talent to work with people, to encourage people, to be able to, my superpower is I can meet you, Sophia, and 6 months from now, as long as I know what you do, I can meet another person and I can make that connection, right? So the resilience comes in saying, well, actually, I had this setback, or what I felt was a setback, as far as all the visions that I had for what I wanted Cadence to be. But then that strength in knowing, well, he knew she was going to need glasses. He knew in all of the challenges that I faced, he knew that that particular thing was not for me. And he knew that I was not going to be 6'5". That's why I'm not in the NBA.
Yeah,
right?
5'2". I know what you mean. Yeah.
Right? So he knew that. So like every setback. So with that, in times where I've had jobs and I'm not just saying this, but I've been too honest for my job. Like, because I work in finance, and because I'm not going to do a thing that is acceptable within the industry, but sits outside of what I believe is the right and correct thing to do with a client, I've not been promoted, or I've, been moved to a different department. But in all of that, I've been resilient. Maybe not in the moment, but when I reflect on it, I've been resilient by knowing that door was shut because another door needs to be open.
So purpose has an impact upon resilience, would you say? Knowing your purpose has an impact upon resilience. So how do we find our purpose? How do we know that we are on that journey, and that, a situation has come up, we feel, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to deal with this. I'm done. I'm finished. How does somebody find their purpose?
So I tell people, live on purpose.
Live
and
on
how
purpose.
you
Yeah, I like that.
So how you can, one of the ways that I found that you probably can find your purpose is usually the intersection between the thing that you're really good at and the thing that really frustrates you. And it's that intersection. So for example, Layla, my wife, she does not like disorder. And she's really good at design and organization. So her purpose lies in that intersection. So you have people that cannot stand by and see injustice. And maybe they have a very solid mind for retaining information. Maybe they're a lawyer and they become an advocate for people that are, being mistreated or whatever. So because as human beings, most of our actions are either to move towards pleasure or away from pain. So the thing that you don't like is that discomfort that you want to move away from. But the thing that you're good at is the thing that you're going to move towards. So your purpose is that intersection.
Oh, you have so eloquently described what is going on in my head in terms of the things that I would want for myself is on the other side of my pain and my discomfort. Do you get what I mean? If we stay in our zone of comfortability, we will not grow. So on the other side of that, that is where the pain is. We have to go through that pain in order to be successful. I have created certain things in my life which has put me at a discomfort because I want to be successful in the things that I choose to do. So I shared this with a friend. I said, if the things that I want to do, I need to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
But being uncomfortable and being in pain because of the things that I want are on the other side of that.
Yes. And that's where the growth is. That's the resilience. And that's the resistance that you need. So if you're going in the gym, you put more weight on when you want to get stronger. You know, if you keep just, you know, doing light weights, you're not going to get stronger. You might get more cut and have a 17 pack like what I have, but you're not going to get stronger.
Well, my one pack is doing very well, thank you. Back on your entrepreneurial path, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
People don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. So first and foremost, even as a banker, I would say always have a business plan, not because you're going to come and I'm going to lend you money, but your business plan is your blueprint and it holds you accountable to yourself. So always do a comprehensive business plan where you're doing market research, you're understanding your cost of sale, you're understanding all the fundamentals. Put that together. Put that together. So I'd say number one, have a business plan. Number two, test everything you do against my 4 key pillars. Is it scalable? Is it sustainable? Is it repeatable? Is it franchisable? So is it scalable? If you were successful at the thing that you're claiming you want to be successful at, would your structure implode? Because you can't now, you get an interview on ITV about your new hair care product and you have 5,000 orders in one day. Can you scale up to that? Is it sustainable? So would you be able to, so when you first get started, you can be very passionate at your job and or your business and you're doing it 6-7 days a week. Is that sustainable? It's probably not, because you shouldn't build a business to the detriment of your family. So I can tell you, my wife might let me do, 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks of 6-7 days a week, but that's not sustainable behind that, right? Is it repeatable? So once it's up and running, make sure that you can repeat each of the processes and get the same output every single time. And lastly, the franchisable. I don't know if that's a word, but I say it all the time. Are you building something that everything just lives in your mind? So but when you die, is this a system that your children, your nephews, your nieces could pick up and duplicate that success? Or in your life, would somebody be able to buy it and it's in a way that there's processes in place, there's data, there's a customer base, there's a way that an accountant could look at it and say, this is the value of this business or of this service.
I love your 4 pillars, and I want to touch on the sustainability part. How do we balance, in terms of, we're still on the topic of resilience, how do we balance ambition with self-care?
So that's really important. And that is part of what I would say is a comprehensive business plan, is also understanding what are the most important things to you and the 3 whys. So quite often, if I go back to my music career, I thought at the time I wanted to be a rapper, but I didn't actually want it to be a rapper. I just wanted to be someone that's influential. I wanted to be a thought leader. And at that time, random things were happening in the country, and they'd go interview some rapper, just like what Dave Chappelle, I think it was Dave Chappelle, says, I don't really care what Ja Rule has to say about a hurricane, right? Like, I don't. But at that time, I thought I wanted to be a rapper. So if I had asked myself the 3 whys, I would have gotten to the point where I actually understood I just want to have a structure and an entity that makes me a key person of influence, that when there's something in my field of interest, people will come to me and ask me a question. So it took me a while to figure that out, and it took me a while to realize that, but I got there in the end. And as a business owner, you need to understand the why and what's important to you. So, for example, if I'm saying I want to have a business with a turnover of $1 million, and I haven't also taken into account the balance of my life, that I want to have a successful marriage. I want to have children who know me, love me, and never remember a time where I missed their piano recital or ballet. You have to then say, well, that means I can't work 80 hours a week, right? So that resilience, if you've built it out properly, you might then say, well, I'm not going to be able to have that high performing business to that level, but that's okay, because I'll have a solid marriage and I'll have kids that love me. But maybe on the relationship and marriage side, that's not that important to you. Maybe that's something that you'll do later. But if within your business plan, you have mapped out what's important to you and asked yourself the 3 whys and got to the true core of what you want, you can pursue it. And then you won't be faced with the artificial roadblocks, and you won't have the pop-ups of the, now I'm realizing that actually I have no friends because all I'm doing is working.
Yeah, I think that it's about placing, what do you place most value in? I've had burnt out, and it is, not a nice place to be at all. And the reason why I had burnt out is because I was a people pleaser. I said yes to everybody and no to myself. You understand? And through that time, I was doing so much. When I even think about it, I'm like, wow, Sophia, how did you go on all those years in terms of volunteering and doing many contracts and businesses? It was just so much. Yes, 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 yes to everybody and everything, but no to myself. So now, how smart am I? No, not today. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
even weekends. Sometimes I get messages over the weekends about work. I'm like, no, it is ignored until the Monday morning. I really have
Because
to, adopt self-care routine.
Because if you don't take care of yourself, then even the parts that you're giving of yourself, it's not your best self. So that to be able to, as you said, do that self-care, you need to have some time just in your space where you're strategizing, you're thinking about yourself. And I think that's the other part of business planning your days, structuring things that you have time to be strategic, you have times to be operational, you have times to be reflective. But that self-care, it's better for you to just say no to a thing, that you can be a better you, that when you say yes to something else, they're getting a better version of Sophia.
It's so true. And also using time for your advantage as well. Okay. Like now, I can just work in blocks of a couple of hours, and then I may go for a walk up the road or just put on some music. I try to, my good friend Victoria, she sent me a post on YouTube about the importance of play. In order how to break up your day. So every couple of hours, go and dance. Do you know what I mean? Like really put on some music and dance around your living room or whatever you need to do, or you go outside and have a walk, be in nature. So that has really helped me in order to balance my day and to be the best version of myself.
Yeah, and that comes from planning, because sometimes, especially because I know you're a very ambitious, hardworking person, if you haven't structured your day properly, you can sit down and start working, and before you know it, 4 or 5 hours have passed. But if you've structured and you've made that commitment to yourself that, I'm going to be healthy. So I'm not going to be someone that's successful and unhealthy, because then you can't enjoy the success. So that structure and that commitment to self-care is important, but you have to be deliberate about it, and you have to be structured in it.
When you say deliberate and structured, that's so true. So what about support networks in order to still maintain your resilience, your fortitude, your grit? Is that important to you, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to me because you don't want to reach a level of success and have no one to share it with. Right? So you want to make sure that you maintain relationships. You want to make sure that you have a group of people around you that challenge you, that stretch you, that will tell you when you got it wrong. Because I think one of the mistakes that a lot of business owners make, they surround themselves with people that are cheerleaders, but don't understand the business world or aren't experts in these areas. And sometimes when people are just telling you, yes, 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 that's good, that's good, that's good, it's not helpful, because we're in a commercial world. I'm a capitalist, right? So I need to make sure that if I'm purchasing something, the value that I'm getting exceeds or matches what I'm paying for it. Now, if I surround myself with people and everyone's like, yeah, that's amazing, Anthony, that course is worth $5 million, right? And then I take it to market and no one buys it, they didn't help me. I would rather them say, well, listen, there's 5 other competitors that are doing a similar thing. How are you going to differentiate yourself? What additional value are you going to add? So that network is very important. And that network, it can be a mastermind group or, just a formal set of people where you have a contract with them to say, look, I'm going to need this type of support from you. I need for you to be honest with me. I need for you to challenge and stretch me. And at those times where I stop believing in myself, I'm going to need that battery from you. You need to put that battery in my back. You need to remind me of why I've started this whole thing. And if you can have that type of network, and I think the other thing, going back to my faith, I also need to surround myself with people that have like values. Do you get what I'm saying? So, and I'm not perfect. So please, 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 I'm not saying that I'm perfect. But as a man and as a married man, I need to surround myself with other men that value that relationship as much as I do. Because what can happen is if they're not there to say, well, listen, how does your wife feel about this? Are you missing that piano recital? If they're just focused on well, you need to get that bag, and if they're not sharing those values, they can allow me to be my own worst enemy. But if we have shared values and we all committed to the fact that, okay, I want people to, when they meet me, be able to walk away feeling better about themselves. I want people to be able to say, this is a man of integrity. He doesn't always get it right, but when he gets it wrong, he'll hold his hands up. I need to surround myself with people like that. They're not perfect people, but it's a contract that we make with each other that in all of the aspects of our life, finance, faith, fitness, friendship, we're all aligned and we're all on the same page.
So what's really interesting what you said like value, and I thought that you was going to say like-mindedness. So what's the difference between like value and like-mindedness?
Because I think when I say like values, I think it encompasses a little bit more, because my values will indicate. So for example, I've told this story before, but when I was a manager at HSBC, right? And I had a team. And at this time, this was the time where my bonus was the sum of all of my staff members. So I had nine people that I directly managed. So the more money they made, the more money I made, right? My value is to be a person of integrity, right? So what had happened is we had a member of staff named Lee who left. All of his business got what they call orphaned. So it was business that was going to complete. However, no one owned it because he had left. One of my team members came to me. She's like, listen, boss, Lee left. There's 4 deals that are about to complete worth X amount. Can I have at least one of them, because if you give me one of these deals, it takes me to the next bonus threshold, right? So I didn't even have to think about it, because again, I have a value, and that value is to be a person of integrity. And I said, no. I said, no. And her response was, I knew you'd say that. So that indicates to me, she had an expectation of me based on my values, and she would have been disappointed to a degree had I said yes. But that's not where the story ends. Like 3-4 years later, my brother comes home and he's like, you're not going to believe this. I was like, what? He said, I was at this business meeting and we were all just talking, just making banter because it was a meal. And we were all talking about good managers that we've had. And one of the ladies said, the best manager I ever had was this guy named Anthony Lindsay. And my brother's like, okay. And she told that story 4 years later, 3-4 years later. Now, someone who's like-minded may not have that value. So someone might be driven to make money, to XYZ, but that story that I've just told won't resonate with them, because they'll be like, I'd have just taken the money. That could have been an extra X amount. But for me, I get more value in that story because it demonstrated that when the chips were down, and I could have used the money, I'm not even going to lie. When the chips were down, I stood beside my value. And had I not done that, a person that has the same values of me would have called me up on it. They'd have been like, how could you do that? Because that's a bad testimony to that person, because it shows you don't really believe what you say you believe, and you don't really value integrity.
That story, integrity, important. And I've got a good friend, 𝗂𝗵𝗀 𝗘𝗽𝗓, and the one thing that she always says is that, Sophia, integrity, man, integrity, that's you. I tell you, that is you. Whatever you say, whatever I say, I show it out in my actions. But sometimes, don't you feel, or do you feel that it can be sometimes a struggle, because I say what it is I want to do, and sometimes you can get conflict of appointments, diary appointments, or, you know, things that you have to do. And it can be quite a challenge to keep up, to say that you are going to carry out that action. And sometimes I do get conflicted, but I try as much as possible to show up and turn up. Do you have that conflict as well?
100%. And I fail a lot of the time because, as you said, because you're a person of integrity, you want your yes to be yes and your no to be no. And at the time you said the yes, it probably made sense and it could have made sense. But because of the level of service that I like to give people and the level of engagement, it may mean that something ended up taking longer, or, you know, and then you're conflicted because you're like, well, I've committed to this thing, but I'm already in this thing. How do I deal with that? So yeah, I struggle with that, and it's something that I continually want to get better at. But the other thing about me is I've realized just admitting your mistakes is something that is empowering. So when I get it wrong, or if I'm going to let someone down, it is a matter of, it's going to happen anyway. I can either come up with excuses, or I can just honestly say, listen, I've let you down, or I'm going to let you down because of this particular thing. And people tend to have more grace with you when that's the case, than if you try to, you know, if you try to front and act like, oh, well, it was your fault anyway, or I didn't want to do this anyway. So I struggle with it. I don't always get it right. And those are the times where I have to then say, you know what, I'm so sorry. I'm not able to deliver what I said I would.
Yeah. And also, I'm thinking about letting people down, and that going back to what I was sharing about being a people pleaser. So that's why sometimes I have that conflict with, I want my yes to be yes, but I still don't want to let down that individual. But I think being authentic and being honest and truthful is just so key, and people really respect that. I cannot attend this event because, you know what, I'm done. I have no more petrol in the tank, I'm finished. And people get that now. Do you get what I mean? So I
Yes.
think being honest and upfront is important. So as we come to the end now, what would be your last words, your final words to really advise somebody who's going through a tough time and you want to advise them in terms of their entrepreneurial journey, in terms of resilience? What advice would you share?
I think the main thing is to understand where you are now is a snapshot. It's not the final destination. So you will encounter resilience, but the best stories and the most encouraging stories are the ones that have the lowest points in them. So when you look at like the survivorship bias, so you hear all these stories about these people that are now amazing people doing amazing things. I remember watching a documentary about Elon Musk, and this was before he was the Elon Musk that we know now, and he was in tears because he was saying he had just sold PayPal. He had invested all of that money into SpaceX, and the rockets kept crashing. He said he was like a couple of days away from filing bankruptcy, and he was waiting for a contract from the government or something. But I say that to say this, that snapshot is what makes some people, not everyone, but some people that find Elon Musk to be a inspiring person. When you see the lows and you see the rockets crash and you hear that he's autistic, that's what makes it amazing. So I look at where I am now in my life and the obstacles that I even face now and the challenges that I face now. I say, you know what? This is going to be a good chapter in my next book. And it sounds corny and cheesy, but things can change on a dime. So I don't want to spend too much time sitting around feeling sorry for myself. I will go through that. So I'm not even lying. I've had times in my life where I've literally done the fetal ball up in tears, right? Luckily, I live by myself and I could do that. And I will go through that. But what I've learned is to recover quicker and to say, look, I'm feeling really down right now. Nothing is working out right now. That let me accept that, but let me also put some energy into saying, how am I going to shape this? How am I going to move to that next level? Because I also know when I reach that next level, I'm going to have that down again. So just accepting that there's always going to be a down. In the future, you'll be able to look back at that down, and that will be the point that you bounce back from. But this is life. This is the life we're given. And bringing it back to my faith, understanding that I was created for a purpose. And this lesson that I'm learning now is what I need to be able to fulfill my purpose. Unless, let me give the caveat, unless it's just the just reward of my sin or my shortcoming. So if I do something stupid and something happens to me, that's just because I did something stupid and something happened to me. I can't blame that on anyone else. But, just in the day-to-day setbacks that you have as a business owner, in the day-to-day setbacks you have in life, understand that those setbacks are the things that make the highs higher.
That's some really good advice. Really brilliant advice. And thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you.
On Long Story Short, I've learned so much about you, about business, and I feel invigorated. I feel that even myself, that I am going to continue to have that fortitude, to have that grit and that will to be a success. Thank you.
Thank you. And I feel like I made the long story long. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how short I made it. But
it was a long story short. Trust me, it was long story short. It was all good.
Good. Because I think it's so good to be able to talk to you, because you have like this counselor thing about you where you just bring things out and you make people feel comfortable. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you.